Now to discuss Democratic Senator Adam Schiff of California. So, Senator, I have not seen any action in Congress to move forward with a bill that would ban both congressional and presidential stock trading since last year when President Trump lashed out at Senator Josh Hawley for supporting that bill. Is that legislation completely dead?
It's not completely dead, and I think it has at least some measure of bipartisan support, much more overwhelming on the Democratic side. But Republicans, even that are in agreement with us that we should ban this practice, they hate crossing the president. And the president having singled out one of them, that's a strong deterrent to actually putting in the hard work to get it done. And obviously, this isn't going to move in either house unless Republican leadership is willing to move it. So
there's a lot of social media networks that sell traders access to an early data feed. But Truth Social is special because the president has a stake in it, and that's where he posts. And we learned today that Truth Social will sell Wall Street firms quicker access to posts from President Trump, and his posts move markets. He posts something and, negative about Company X, it affects Company X, and now they're offering Wall Street quicker access to see these posts.
Yes, I think these two stories are very closely interlinked. In the first one, what people I think need to recognize, this is not a blind trust that the president has. So when the White House says he has no advance notice of what his portfolio manager is buying, that may or may not be true, but he finds out about it once they buy it. And when he later that week posts something favorable about that company, he knows that money, that extra value goes into his pocket. And now this added story about how you can pay a premium to get first access to his social media posts that move markets. If you'll give him a cut, that's basically what it is. He gets part of the profits of Truth Social. This is the president saying, give me a cut and I'll give you the opportunity to make money off my statements, just as I make money off my own statements.
Let's turn to the president's address this evening. The White House says that the president's going to talk about the security of U.S. elections. He has actually, because it's hard to argue that the 2024 elections were fixed, given the fact that Republicans control the House and the Senate and the White House. So if you guys are fixing elections, you're not doing a very good job, I have to say. But he has singled out Spencer Pratt losing the mayor's race in Los Angeles. What's your take on that?
Well, he's made a bunch of absurd claims about California elections. He's done this going back several years now, made false claims of massive fraud, of millions of undocumented people voting, all nonsense. In this election, he has blamed manipulation somehow for Spencer Pratt's loss. Spencer Pratt lost because he was completely out of step with voters in Los Angeles. The more MAGA he became, the more votes he lost. The president is taking credit for Steve Hilton making it into the runoff, basically claiming that...
For the governor's race, yeah.
For the governor's race, claiming that because he pointed out that Hilton was falling behind, that somehow California had changed the outcome to placate him or appease him or I don't know what. Another crazy conspiracy theory without a single grain of truth to it.
Today, the military said it launched yet another wave of strikes on Iran, a war that we were told would last just a few weeks, launched in February. Last Friday, Trump formally notified Congress military action against Iran has resumed. You're planning to introduce another war powers resolution, which would force Republicans to vote one way or the other on it. A lot of them already walked back their initial rebuke of President Trump. Either they voted that way or said they would and didn't. Senator Cassidy comes to mind. What makes you think that they might defy Trump for this new war powers resolution?
Well, there have been a couple instances where Republicans have voted with us on war powers resolutions and then when pressured have backed off. They've generally given some explanation for why they backed off. In that case, it was to, at least according to one of the senators, it was to give the president leverage in the talks around the ceasefire. Well, the ceasefire is over. It never really took hold. But now that we're back in a full military exchange with Iran, now that the president is contemplating even potentially putting troops on the ground, I would expect we will get more support. Some of the people who voted with us before will vote with us again, and we might get new people voting with us as this war has gone on and on and on, the support for these resolutions has only increased. And it increasingly looks like we're in a quagmire now where the president doesn't know what he's doing, doesn't know what to do, announces we're going to charge tolls in the strait, something he said was illegal, and then 24 hours later says we're not going to charge tolls in the strait. So I think the incompetent handling of the war, the risk that the war may escalate again, and the fear, frankly, a lot of Republicans have that he is killing their chances in the midterms may motivate Republicans to vote with us.
It's the oldest story in Washington. Wars are very easy to get into and very tough to get out of. Senator Adam Schiff, Democrat of California, good to see you again, sir. Thank you.